You know how you can tell your marriage is over? When you get a calendar invite for your own ambush. There I was, Miles Rellan, sitting in my home office at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, coffee getting cold while I reviewed security system proposals for 3 new Dallas clients. My company, Sentinel Tech Solutions, had been growing steadily for 5 years since I'd left the Army. Nothing fancy, just good, honest work installing and monitoring security systems for businesses and wealthy homeowners who valued their privacy and possessions. The notification popped up on my phone. Important discussion, Miles and Tessa, tonight, 8 p.m., living room. Important discussion, in our living room. Scheduled like a board meeting. I'd been married to Tessa for 3 years, and I'd learned to read her signals. The woman who used to leave love notes in my lunch bag now sent calendar invites for conversations. The woman who once surprised me with weekend getaways to Austin now scheduled important discussions, like dental appointments. "Dad, you coming to breakfast?" Eli called from downstairs. My 12-year-old son from my first marriage had been living with us since his mother passed 4 years ago. The kid was the bright spot in my increasingly complicated life. "Be right there, buddy," I called back, closing the laptop. Whatever Tessa had planned for tonight, I'd deal with it then. Right now, my son needed pancakes and help with his math homework. Downstairs, Tessa stood at the kitchen island, perfectly dressed in yoga pants and a designer top that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that effortless style that actually took an hour to achieve. She was scrolling through her phone, probably updating her Instagram story about her morning smoothie routine. "Morning," I said, heading for the coffee maker. She looked up briefly. "Oh, Miles, did you see my calendar invite? Hard to miss. Important discussion sounds ominous." Tessa's smile was the kind you'd see on a realtor showing you a house with foundation problems. "We just need to talk about some things, adult things." Eli wandered in, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The kid had his mother's dark hair and my stubborn streak. "Can we have pancakes this weekend?" he asked. "Absolutely," I said, ruffling his hair. "Maybe we can hit that new arcade afterward." Tessa cleared her throat. "Eli, honey, you might want to make other plans this weekend. Your father and I have some logistics to work out." The way she said logistics made my stomach tighten. I'd heard that tone before, back in the Army when officers were about to deliver news that would ruin your entire week. "What kind of logistics?" I asked. "Tonight, Miles. We'll discuss everything tonight." Eli looked between us, that worried expression kids get when they sense the adults are about to make their world complicated. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, buddy," I said, shooting Tessa a look that clearly meant not in front of the kid. "Come on, I'll drive you to school." The ride to Eli's middle school was quiet, except for the radio playing some pop song I didn't recognize. As we pulled up to the drop-off zone, Eli turned to me with those serious eyes that reminded me so much of his mother. "Dad, is Tessa going to leave?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest. "Why would you ask that?" "She's been different lately, colder. And last week I heard her on the phone talking about getting what she deserves." Smart kid, too smart for his own good sometimes. "Whatever happens, Eli, you and I are solid. That's never going to change." He nodded, but I could see the worry lines around his eyes. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, buddy. Have a good day." I watched him disappear into the crowd of students, then sat in my truck for a moment, trying to piece together the puzzle. Tessa's recent behavior made more sense now. The late nights, out with friends, the way she'd started treating our shared spaces like a hotel lobby, the sudden interest in our financial accounts and property deeds. My phone buzzed with a text from my attorney, Grant Kessler. "Coffee this afternoon? Need to discuss some contract revisions for the Henderson account." Grant and I had served together overseas before he went to law school. He was the kind of guy who could spot trouble 3 moves ahead, which made him invaluable for business contracts and, apparently, marriage problems I didn't even know I had yet. I texted back, "Make it lunch. Might need more than coffee today." The rest of the morning blurred past in a series of client calls and equipment installations. My team was good at their jobs, which meant I could focus on the growing knot in my stomach. By noon, I was ready for whatever wisdom Grant could offer. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place where lawyers and business owners could have private conversations without being overheard. Grant was already waiting, looking like he'd stepped out of a courtroom drama with his pressed shirt and tired eyes. "You look like someone who's about to get served with papers," he said as I sat down. "That obvious? 20 years of legal practice teaches you to read faces. What's going on?" I told him about the calendar invite, Tessa's strange behavior, and Eli's observations. Grant listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a legal pad. "When's the last time you reviewed your financial accounts?" he asked. "Last month. Everything looked normal. Property deeds, insurance policies, investment portfolios." "Grant, you're making me paranoid." "Good. Paranoid people don't get blindsided in divorce court." He leaned forward. "Miles, I've seen this pattern before. The scheduling, the emotional distance, the sudden interest in assets. She's been planning this." "Planning what?" "Your divorce." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I'd known something was wrong, but hearing it stated so bluntly made it real. "What do I do?" "Tonight, you listen. Don't react, don't argue, don't make any commitments. Just listen and remember everything she says. Then call me." "And if she wants to work things out?" Grant's expression told me everything I needed to know. "Miles, people who want to work things out don't send calendar invites for important discussions. They have conversations." The afternoon crawled by. I tried to focus on work, but every client call felt like I was going through the motions. By 6 o'clock I was home, helping Eli with his algebra homework at the kitchen table, while Tessa moved around upstairs, getting ready for whatever performance she had planned. "Dad, you're not really listening," Eli said, tapping his pencil on the textbook. "Sorry, buddy. Let's try that problem again." "Is this about tonight?" I looked at my son, this kid who'd already lost one parent and was smart enough to see another storm coming. "Maybe. But remember what I said this morning, you and I are solid." At 7:45, Tessa came downstairs wearing the black dress she'd worn to our anniversary dinner last year. Her makeup was perfect, her hair styled like she was going to a business meeting or a funeral. "Eli, honey, why don't you go upstairs and work on your homework?" she said, with that fake sweetness she used when she wanted something. "I already finished it," Eli replied, not moving from the kitchen table. "Then maybe watch a movie or play a game. Your father and I need to have an adult conversation." Eli looked at me, and I nodded. "Go ahead, buddy. I'll check on you later." After he disappeared upstairs, Tessa and I moved to the living room. She sat on the white leather sofa we'd picked out together 3 years ago, while I took the armchair across from her. The distance felt intentional. "So," I said, "what's this important discussion about?" Tessa folded her hands in her lap, the picture of composure. "Miles, I think we both know this isn't working anymore." "This?" "Our marriage. We've grown apart. We want different things. We've become different people." I waited for her to continue, remembering Grant's advice to listen and remember. "I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I believe it would be best for both of us if we got a divorce." There it was. Clean, simple, delivered like a weather report. "I see," I said. "And what exactly do you want from this divorce?" Tessa's composure cracked slightly, revealing something harder underneath. "I want to be fair, Miles. I want us both to walk away with what we deserve." "Which is?" "I want the house, the cars, the investment accounts, The business assets. She paused, then delivered the line that would echo in my head for weeks. I want the mansion, the cars, everything except your son. I'm not his mother anyway. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Not just the demand for everything we'd built together, but the dismissal of Eli like he was a piece of furniture she didn't want to move. Everything except my son, I repeated. I never wanted children, Miles. You knew that when we got married. I tried to be good to Eli, but I'm not cut out for motherhood. He'll be better off with just you. I studied her face, looking for any trace of the woman I'd married, the woman who'd cried at our wedding, the woman who'd held my hand during Eli's parent-teacher conferences. She was gone, replaced by this cold stranger in a black dress. So let me get this straight, I said. You want the $3.8 million house, the luxury cars, the investment portfolio, and the business assets. And in return, I get my son, and what exactly? Your freedom, Miles. The chance to start over without the burden of maintaining all this. She gestured around the room like she was describing a prison. Burden, I said. You know what I mean. Actually, I was starting to understand exactly what she meant. And more importantly, I was beginning to understand what she didn't know she'd just revealed. I'll need to think about this, Tessa. Of course. Take all the time you need. She stood up, smoothing her dress. I've already spoken to an attorney, Ryan Ventor. He's supposed to be excellent with these kinds of cases. Ryan Ventor. I filed the name away for later. I'm sure he is, I said. After Tessa went upstairs, I sat in the living room for a long time, staring at the family photos on the mantel, pictures of our wedding, vacation trips, holidays with Eli, all of it about to become evidence in a legal proceeding. My phone buzzed with a text from Grant. How did it go? I typed back, she wants everything except my son. Can you meet tomorrow morning? His response came immediately. I'll clear my schedule. Upstairs, I found Eli in his room, supposedly reading but obviously listening for sounds from downstairs. When I knocked on his door, he looked up with worried eyes. How bad is it? He asked. I sat on the edge of his bed, trying to find the right words. Tessa and I are probably going to get divorced. Eli nodded like he'd been expecting this news. Are we going to have to move? Maybe. Would that bother you? He shrugged. Not really. This never felt like home anyway. Home is wherever you are. That kid could break your heart and put it back together with the same sentence. Whatever happens, Eli, you're my priority. Not the house, not the cars, not any of it. Just you. I know, Dad. As I tucked him in that night, Eli grabbed my arm. Dad, Tessa's been getting a lot of phone calls lately, and she's been printing stuff from her computer when she thinks I'm not around. What kind of stuff? Papers, with numbers on them, and she's been taking pictures of everything in the house with her phone. Smart kid. Too smart. Thanks for telling me, buddy. Try to get some sleep. But sleep was the last thing on my mind. I spent the night in my home office, going through financial records and trying to piece together what Tessa had been planning. By morning, I had a clearer picture of just how calculated this whole thing had been, and I was starting to form a plan of my own. Grant Kessler's law office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Dallas high-rise, with windows that offered a commanding view of the city. I'd always liked coming here for business meetings, but this felt different. This felt like preparing for war. Coffee? Grant asked as I settled into the leather chair across from his desk. Make it strong. He poured 2 cups from an expensive-looking machine, then opened a yellow legal pad covered with notes. Tell me everything she said, word for word if you can remember. I recounted the entire conversation, watching Grant's expression grow more serious with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. She's been planning this for months, he said. Maybe longer. The asset inventory, the attorney consultation, the emotional detachment. This wasn't a sudden decision. So what's my move? First, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Ryan Ventor is good, but he's also expensive and ambitious. The fact that she chose him tells me she's serious about taking everything. Grant turned to his computer and pulled up what looked like a legal database. Here's what's interesting. Ventor specializes in high-asset divorces, and he's got a reputation for being aggressive in his tactics. Meaning he doesn't just win cases, he destroys the other side, financially and personally. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest that I'd learned to recognize as incoming trouble. So what do? We give her exactly what she wants. I stared at Grant like he'd lost his mind. Come again? Miles, think about this strategically. She wants the house, the cars, the investment accounts, the business assets. Fine. Let her have them. Grant, that's everything I've worked for. Is it? He pulled out another file. Let's talk about what really matters. Eli's Education Trust Fund, established with your first wife's life insurance money. That's separate property, untouchable in a divorce. Right. The rental property on Elm Street that you bought before you married Tessa and put in Eli's name for tax purposes. Also, separate property. Okay. Your military pension and disability benefits. Separate property. I was starting to see where this was going. Now let's talk about what she wants. The mansion with the 3 mortgages you took out to finance the business expansion. The luxury cars that are all leased through the business. The investment accounts that are mostly tied up in company stock. Grant smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Miles, what if I told you that giving Tessa everything she wants might be the best revenge you could possibly get? I'd say you need to explain that in terms a simple security contractor can understand. The house is worth $3.8 million, but you owe $2.2 million on the mortgages. The cars are leased, not owned. The investment accounts are heavily leveraged. If the business hits a rough patch, understanding dawned slowly. She'd be taking on all the debt too. Exactly. And there's something else. I've been doing some research on Ryan Ventor. Turns out he's got quite a reputation in certain circles. Grant turned his computer screen toward me. It showed what looked like a gossip blog focused on Dallas legal circles. Ventor's been linked to several of his female clients over the years. Nothing proven, but there's a pattern. Attractive women going through messy divorces, and suddenly they're seen having dinner with their attorney. You think he's involved with Tessa? I think it would explain why she chose him specifically, and why she's so confident about getting everything she wants. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Check your email, a friend. I looked at Grant, who shrugged. Could be spam. But when I checked my email, I found a message with no text, just a series of attachments. Hotel receipts, parking garage timestamps, and photos. The photos showed Tessa and a man I didn't recognize entering and leaving what looked like an upscale hotel. The timestamps went back 6 months. Grant, I said, turning the phone toward him. I think we just got some interesting evidence. Grant studied the photos with the expression of a man who'd seen every variation of human behavior in divorce court. Well, that changes things. Do you recognize the man? No, but I'm betting it's Ryan Ventor. We'll need to verify that, but if it is... Grant leaned back in his chair. Miles, I think your wife just handed us the keys to the kingdom. What do you mean? If Ventor is having an affair with his client, that's a massive ethics violation. He could lose his license. More importantly for our purposes, it means their entire legal strategy is compromised. I stared at the photos, feeling a mix of anger and something else. Relief, maybe, or vindication. So what's our next move? We play along. Let her file for divorce. Let her make her demands. Let her think she's winning. Meanwhile, we gather evidence and prepare our counter-strategy. And Eli? Eli is your ace in the hole. She's already stated she doesn't want custody, which means you won't have to fight for your son. That's one less thing to worry about. Grant closed the file and looked at me seriously. Miles, I need you to understand something. What I'm proposing isn't just legal strategy. It's psychological warfare. We're going to let Tessa think she's getting everything she wants, right up until the moment we pull the rug out from under her. I'm listening. But it means you have to be patient. You have to watch her celebrate while you pretend to be defeated. You have to let people think you're a pushover who got taken to the cleaners by his ex-wife. I can handle that. Can you? Because once we start this process, there's no going back. We're going to destroy her financially and socially, and we're going to do it using her own greed against her. I thought about Tessa's casual dismissal of Eli. The way she'd planned this whole thing while pretending to be a loving wife. The coldness in her eyes when she'd delivered her ultimatum. Let's do it. The next few days passed in a strange sort of calm. Tessa moved through the house like she was already mentally packing, taking inventory of everything she considered hers. She was polite but distant, treating me like a roommate who'd overstayed his welcome. Eli, meanwhile, had developed an uncanny ability to disappear whenever Tessa was around. I'd find him in his room, supposedly doing homework but actually listening to music, and avoiding the tension that filled the house like smoke. On Thursday evening, while Tessa was out at what she claimed was a book club meeting, Eli and I were in the kitchen making dinner when he dropped a bombshell. "Dad, I need to tell you something about Tessa." I looked up from the pasta I was stirring. "What about her?" "She's been going through your office, when you're at work and I'm at school. I came home early yesterday because I forgot my science project, and I saw her coming out of there with a bunch of papers." "What kind of papers?" "I don't know, but she looked guilty when she saw me, like she'd been caught doing something wrong." I felt that familiar anger rising in my chest. "Did she say anything to you?" "Just that she was looking for some insurance documents. But Dad, she was taking pictures of stuff with her phone." Smart kid. And getting smarter by the day. "Thanks for telling me, Eli. That's important information." "Are we in trouble? Like money trouble?" I stopped stirring and looked at my son. 12 years old and already worrying about adult problems. "No, buddy, we're not in trouble, but Tessa might be." That weekend, while Tessa was at what she claimed was a spa day with her friends, I did some investigating of my own. It didn't take long to find evidence of her snooping. My file cabinet had been rifled through, with documents replaced in the wrong order. My computer showed recent access to financial files that I hadn't opened in weeks. But the most interesting discovery was in the trash. Tessa had printed out several documents and apparently made some notes, then thrown away her rough drafts. Among the crumpled papers, I found a list in her handwriting. House, 3.8 cars, 400K investments, 1.2 business assets, 800K insurance policies, 500K, total 6.7. At the bottom, she'd written, "R says I can get 60-70% in Texas, enough to start over in California." R, as in Ryan. I photographed the list and sent it to Grant with a message. "Found this in the trash. Looks like they've been planning the asset division." His response came back within minutes. "Perfect. This shows premeditation and coordination between attorney and client. Keep gathering evidence." On Sunday evening, Tessa announced that she'd be filing for divorce on Monday morning. "I've tried to make this as painless as possible," she said, standing in the kitchen doorway like she was delivering a press statement. "Ryan thinks we can have everything settled within 60 days if you're reasonable." Define reasonable. Don't fight me on the asset division. Don't try to claim you deserve half of everything. Accept that I'm entitled to the lifestyle I've become accustomed to. And what lifestyle is that exactly? The lifestyle of someone who's been married to a successful business owner, someone who's contributed to building this life we've created. I almost laughed. Tessa's contributions to our life had consisted mainly of spending money and posting Instagram photos of our vacations. "I'll consider your proposal," I said. "Good. Ryan says that if you're cooperative, this can all be very civilized." After she went upstairs, I called Grant. "She's filing tomorrow," I told him. "Perfect. Are you ready for phase 2? What's phase two? We're going to give her exactly what she wants, and then we're going to watch her world fall apart. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic about ruining my day. I opened the envelope in my kitchen while Eli ate cereal and pretended not to watch my reaction. The documents were exactly what I'd expected. Tessa wanted the house, the cars, the investment accounts, the business assets, and spousal support of $15,000 per month for 5 years. In exchange, I would get full custody of Eli and whatever personal belongings she deemed not essential to maintaining her standard of living. "How bad is it?" Eli asked. "About what we expected," I said, folding the papers. "But remember what I told you. We're going to be fine." That afternoon, I met with Grant to plan our response. "Here's what we're going to do," he said, spreading the divorce papers across his desk. "We're going to agree to everything." Everything? Every single demand. The house, the cars, the investments, the spousal support. All of it. "Grant, that's financial suicide." "Is it?" He pulled out a thick folder. "Let's talk about what Tessa doesn't know she's asking for." Grant opened the folder to reveal a complex web of financial documents, business filings, and legal papers. "The house is mortgaged to the hilt. You took out equity loans to expand the business, remember? Current debt on the property is $2.2 million against a value of $3.8 million. That's a net equity of $1.6 million, not $3.8. Right. The cars are all leased through the business. The moment the business stops making payments, they get repossessed. Okay. The investment accounts are heavily leveraged and tied to business performance. If the business has problems, those investments become worthless." I was starting to see the bigger picture. "And what happens if the business has problems?" Grant smiled. "Well, that depends on a lot of factors. Market conditions, client retention, operational costs. Sometimes businesses that look successful on paper are actually quite fragile." "Are you suggesting I sabotage my own company?" "I'm suggesting that businesses sometimes fail for perfectly legitimate reasons. Economic downturns, increased competition, loss of key contracts. These things happen." I stared at the documents, understanding the full scope of what Grant was proposing. "This is risky. So is letting your ex-wife walk away with everything you've worked for while she starts a new life in California with her attorney boyfriend." "How did you know about California?" Grant pointed to the spousal support demand. $15,000 a month for exactly 5 years. That's enough to maintain a comfortable lifestyle in a high-cost area like Los Angeles or San Francisco. She's not planning to stay in Dallas. Over the next few days, I watched Tessa with new eyes. She moved through our house like she was already mentally redecorating, taking photos of rooms and furniture. She spent hours on her phone, presumably talking to Ryan about strategy and logistics. But she also did something interesting. She started posting more frequently on social media, crafting a narrative about her difficult marriage and her brave decision to start over. The posts were carefully worded to generate sympathy without being legally problematic. "Going through a challenging time, but excited about new beginnings," read one post, accompanied by a photo of her looking pensively out a window. "Sometimes the hardest decisions are the right decisions," read another, with a picture of her hands holding a coffee cup. The comments were predictable. Her friends rallied around her with supportive messages about knowing her worth and not settling for less than she deserved. What Tessa didn't know was that I was documenting everything. Screenshots of her posts, records of her activities, timestamps of her whereabouts. Grant had taught me that divorce cases were often won or lost on the details. On Friday, Grant called with news. "I've confirmed the identity of the man in those photos," he said. "It's definitely Ryan Ventor, and I've got more pictures, courtesy of our anonymous friend." "More pictures?" "Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even a jewelry store purchase. Your wife's attorney has been very generous with his gifts. How is this helpful to us?" because it establishes a pattern of ethical violations that goes back months. Ventor has been compromised from the beginning, which means everything he's advised Tessa to do is tainted. Grant paused. But there's something else. I've been doing some digging into Ventor's other cases, and I found something interesting. He's currently representing 2 other women in high-asset divorces, and there are rumors about his relationships with both of them. He's running some kind of operation? It looks like it. Target wealthy women in troubled marriages, seduce them, then help them take their husbands to the cleaners while taking a substantial fee for legal services. I felt that familiar anger rising, but this time it was cold and focused. So what's our move? We document everything, we build our case, and then we destroy both of them in the most public way possible. That weekend, while Tessa was out with her friends celebrating her liberation, I had a long conversation with Eli about what was coming. "Dad, can I ask you something?" he said as we worked together in the garage, organizing tools that would probably be sold along with everything else. Always. "Are you really going to let her take everything?" I looked at my son, this kid who'd already been through so much, and was now watching his world get turned upside down again. "Eli, sometimes in life you have to lose a battle to win the war. Do you understand what that means?" "I think so. Like in chess, when you sacrifice a piece to get a better position." "Exactly like that. Sometimes you have to let your opponent think they're winning until you're ready to make your real move." "And then what happens?" "Then they find out that everything they thought they wanted was actually everything they should have avoided." Eli grinned. "That's pretty sneaky, Dad. Your old man learned a few things in the Army." On Monday morning, I walked into Grant's office with a decision. "I'm ready," I told him. "Let's give her everything she wants." Grant pulled out a fresh legal pad. "All right, let's craft our response. We're going to agree to every single demand, but we're going to do it in a way that protects what really matters." "Which is?" "Your son, your future earning potential, and your ability to start over when this is all finished." Grant began writing. "We'll agree to transfer the house to her name, along with all associated debt. We'll agree to transfer the car leases, the investment accounts, and the business assets. We'll even agree to the spousal support." This still sounds like financial suicide. Trust me, by the time we're finished, Tessa is going to wish she'd never heard the name Ryan Ventor. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal filings and negotiations. True to our strategy, I agreed to every demand Tessa made. The house, the cars, the investments, the spousal support, all of it. Tessa's reaction was exactly what Grant had predicted. She was suspicious at first, then triumphant, then almost giddy with victory. "I have to admit, Miles, I'm surprised," she said one evening as we sat in the living room that would soon be entirely hers. "I expected you to put up more of a fight." "What would be the point?" I said. "You've made it clear what you want, and fighting would just make things more expensive for both of us." "That's very mature of you." "I'm trying to think about what's best for everyone involved." What Tessa didn't know was that while she was celebrating her impending victory, Grant and I were implementing Phase 2 of our plan. It started with my business. Sentinel Tech Solutions had been growing steadily for 5 years, but growth requires investment, and investment requires debt. Over the course of several weeks, I began making strategic decisions that would affect the company's short-term stability. I declined to renew several major contracts, citing concerns about overextension. I increased operational costs by upgrading equipment and expanding the office space. I took out additional business loans to finance these improvements. On paper, it looked like aggressive expansion. In reality, it was controlled demolition. At the same time, Grant was working on the legal front. He'd been in contact with the State Bar of Texas about Ryan Ventor's conduct, providing them with evidence of his pattern of inappropriate relationships with clients. "They're opening an investigation," Grant told me during one of our weekly meetings. "It's going to take time, but Ventor's career is effectively over." "What about Tessa?" That's where things get interesting. I've been monitoring her social media activity and she's been getting careless. Grant showed me his laptop screen, which displayed several of Tessa's recent Instagram posts. The photos showed expensive dinners, luxury shopping trips, and what appeared to be weekend getaways to high-end resorts. She's living like the divorce is already final, Grant said, spending money she doesn't actually have yet, making plans based on assets she doesn't actually own. And she's doing it all very publicly, with posts that establish a timeline of her activities and expenditures. When this goes to court, it's going to look like she was celebrating the destruction of her marriage while spending marital assets on her affair. I studied the photos, feeling a mixture of anger and satisfaction. Tessa had always been careless about consequences, but this level of public documentation was almost reckless. There's something else, Grant said. I've been tracking the financial records from her activities, and it looks like Ventor has been paying for most of these expenses. How is that relevant? Because it establishes that their relationship is more than just attorney-client. He's been supporting her lifestyle while representing her in divorce proceedings. That's a massive conflict of interest. Grant closed the laptop and looked at me seriously. Miles, we're about 3 weeks away from the final hearing. Are you ready for what comes next? What comes next? We're going to destroy both of them in open court, in front of their friends, their colleagues, and anyone else who cares to watch. I thought about Eli, about the life we'd build together after this was all over, about the lesson he'd learn about standing up for yourself when people try to take advantage of you. I'm ready, I said. Good, because it's about to get very interesting. The final hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in Judge Patricia Hawkins's courtroom. Grant had briefed me on Judge Hawkins's reputation. Fair, but no nonsense, with little patience for games or theatrics. She's seen every variation of divorce drama, Grant told me as we prepared for court. What she hasn't seen is what we're about to show her. I arrived at the courthouse early, wearing my best suit and carrying a folder of documents that Grant had prepared. Tessa was already there with Ryan Ventor, both of them looking confident and relaxed. Ventor was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of practiced charm that probably worked well on juries and vulnerable clients. Tessa wore a conservative blue dress that was probably chosen to make her look sympathetic and responsible. She barely glanced at me when I walked in, but I caught Ventor studying me with the expression of a man sizing up his opposition. Mr. Rellan, Judge Hawkins said as the hearing began, I've reviewed your response to the divorce petition, and I have to say it's unusual to see such complete agreement on asset division. Are you certain you want to proceed with these terms? Yes, Your Honor, I said, standing. My wife has made her position clear, and I see no benefit in prolonging this process. Judge Hawkins looked skeptical, but nodded. Very well. Mr. Ventor, please present your client's case. Ventor stood and launched into what was clearly a prepared speech about Tessa's contributions to the marriage and her need for financial security. He painted a picture of a devoted wife who had sacrificed her own career to support her husband's business ventures. It was a compelling performance, and I could see Judge Hawkins taking notes. Tessa sat quietly, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. When Ventor finished, Judge Hawkins turned to Grant. Mr. Kessler, does your client wish to present any evidence or arguments? Yes, Your Honor. We have several items we'd like to submit to the court. Grant stood and approached the bench with a thick folder. Your Honor, while Mr. Rellan has agreed to his wife's asset demands, we believe the court should have complete information about the circumstances surrounding this divorce. Judge Hawkins opened the folder and began reading. I watched her expression change from mild interest to concern to what looked like anger. Mr. Ventor, she said finally, are you aware that your client has been documenting her activities on social media throughout these proceedings? Ventor looked confused. I'm not sure what you mean, Your Honor. I mean posts showing expensive dinners, shopping trips, and vacations, all time-stamped during the period when she was claiming financial hardship and seeking spousal support. Tessa's face went pale. She whispered something to Ventor, who was now looking decidedly uncomfortable. Furthermore, Judge Hawkins continued, there appear to be financial records showing that you, Mr. Ventor, have been paying for many of these activities. Would you care to explain the nature of your relationship with your client? The courtroom fell silent. I could see Tessa gripping the arms of her chair, and Ventor's confident demeanor had completely evaporated. Your Honor, Ventor began, I can explain. I'm sure you can, Judge Hawkins interrupted. But first, I'd like to hear from Mr. Rellan about the true financial status of the assets his wife is claiming. Grant nodded to me, and I stood. Your Honor, I'd like to clarify the actual value of the assets in question. For the next 20 minutes, I walked Judge Hawkins through the real financial picture. The house with its massive debt load, the leased cars that would be repossessed the moment the business stopped making payments, the leveraged investments that were tied to business performance. So, Mrs. Rellan, Judge Hawkins said when I finished, you're asking for assets with a gross value of approximately $6.7 million, but a net value of roughly $800,000, along with debt obligations of over $2 million? Tessa looked like she was going to be sick. I wasn't aware of all the details. But your attorney was aware, weren't you, Mr. Ventor? Ventor opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no good answer to that question. Your Honor, Grant said, we have one more piece of evidence we'd like to submit. He handed Judge Hawkins another folder. This one contained the photographs of Tessa and Ventor, along with hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and jewelry store purchases. Judge Hawkins studied the documents for what felt like an eternity. When she finally looked up, her expression was thunderous. Mr. Ventor, I'm ordering you to withdraw from this case immediately. I'm also referring your conduct to the state bar for investigation. Ventor started to protest, but Judge Hawkins cut him off. Furthermore, Mrs. Rellan, I'm denying your request for spousal support and ordering you to pay your own legal fees. The asset division will proceed as agreed, but you should understand exactly what you're receiving. Tessa finally found her voice. Your Honor, I don't understand. What does this mean? Judge Hawkins looked at her with something approaching pity. It means, Mrs. Rellan, that you're about to become the sole owner of approximately $2 million in debt, along with assets that will be worthless the moment your husband's business encounters any difficulties. As we left the courthouse, Tessa tried to approach me in the parking lot. Ventor was nowhere to be seen, having disappeared immediately after the judge's ruling. Miles, wait, she called. We need to talk about this. I stopped and turned around. What's there to talk about, Tessa? You got exactly what you wanted. But the judge said, she said I'm getting debt, not assets. You're getting exactly what you asked for. The house, the cars, the investments, everything except my son. But what am I supposed to do with all that debt? I looked at this woman who had planned to destroy my life and take everything I'd worked for, and I felt nothing but contempt. I guess you'll figure it out, I said. Maybe your boyfriend can help you. Oh wait, he just lost his law license. That evening, Eli and I sat in our new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom place about 10 minutes from his school. It wasn't much compared to the mansion, but it was ours, and it was paid for with money from his mother's life insurance that Tessa had never known about. So what happens now? Eli asked as we unpacked boxes. Now we start over. You finish middle school, I rebuild the business, and we figure out what comes next. And Tessa? Tessa gets to learn about consequences. My phone rang. It was Grant. How are you feeling? He asked, like a man who just watched justice get served. It gets better. I just got a call from a friend at the state bar. Ventor's not just losing his license. He's facing criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. Turns out you weren't his only victim. What about Tessa? Well, she's now the proud owner of a mansion she can't afford, cars she can't pay for, and investment accounts that are about to become worthless when your business files for bankruptcy next week. I looked around our small apartment, at my son doing homework at the kitchen table, at the simple life we were building together. Grant? Yeah? Remind me to never get on your bad side. He laughed. Miles, this was all your plan. I just helped you execute it. 3 months later, I was reading the newspaper when I saw a small item in the business section. Local security company files for bankruptcy, citing economic pressures. The article mentioned that Sentinel Tech Solutions had been struggling with debt and declining contracts, forcing the owner to shut down operations and liquidate assets. What the article didn't mention was that I had already started a new company, Rellan Security Consulting, using the contacts and expertise I'd built over 5 years. The new company was smaller, more focused, and entirely debt-free. It also didn't mention that the economic pressures were entirely self-inflicted, designed to make the assets Tessa had claimed worthless, while preserving my ability to earn a living. Eli looked up from his own section of the paper. Dad, there's an article here about some lady who lost her house to foreclosure. I glanced at the article he was pointing to. The photo showed a familiar blonde woman standing in front of a mansion with a for sale sign in the yard. Says here she got the house in a divorce but couldn't keep up with the payments, Eli continued. That's pretty sad. Yes, I said, folding my section of the paper. That is sad. But I wasn't feeling sad. I was feeling like a man who had played a long game and won. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I thought the chapter on Tessa was closed. Eli and I had settled into our new routine, my business was growing steadily, and the mansion that had once been our home was now just another foreclosure listing in the Dallas real estate market. Then Grant called with news that changed everything. Miles, we have a problem, he said. Tessa's trying to overturn the divorce decree. I was in my new office, a modest space in a business park that was a far cry from the home office I'd lost, but it was mine, and it was profitable. On what grounds? She's claiming fraud. Says you deliberately concealed the true financial status of the assets, and that she was coerced into accepting a settlement that was designed to harm her. Can she do that? She can try. She's hired a new attorney, someone named Patricia Wells. Wells has a reputation for taking on impossible cases and making them very expensive for the other side. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. So what does this mean? It means we're going back to court, and this time, Tessa's going to fight dirty. The new hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning, 8 months after the original divorce decree. I arrived at the courthouse to find Tessa looking very different from the confident woman who had demanded everything except my son. She was thinner, her clothes were less expensive, and there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her new attorney, Patricia Wells, was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s who radiated the kind of aggressive competence that made opposing lawyers nervous. Your Honor, Wells began, my client was the victim of an elaborate fraud designed to strip her of her rightful share of marital assets. Mr. Rellan deliberately concealed the true financial status of his business and manipulated the asset division to ensure that my client would be left with worthless properties and crushing debt. Judge Hawkins, who was presiding over this hearing as well, listened with a neutral expression. Ms. Wells, the original decree was based on Mrs. Rellan's explicit demands for specific assets. How do you claim fraud when your client received exactly what she asked for? Because Mr. Rellan knew that those assets were worthless, Your Honor. He knew that his business was failing, he knew that the house was overmortgaged, and he knew that the investment accounts were tied to worthless stock. He deliberately allowed my client to make demands based on false information. It was a clever argument, and I could see Judge Hawkins considering it seriously. Grant stood to respond. Your Honor, Mr. Rellan provided complete financial disclosure during the original proceedings. Every document, every account balance, every debt obligation was made available to Mrs. Rellan and her attorney. If they failed to analyze that information properly, That's not grounds for overturning a legal decree. Furthermore, Grant continued, Mrs. Rellan's own social media posts during the divorce proceedings show that she was more interested in celebrating her anticipated victory than in understanding the financial implications of her demands. Wells objected. Your Honor, my client's social media activity is irrelevant to the question of whether she was defrauded. I disagree, Judge Hawkins said. The posts in question show a pattern of behavior that suggests Mrs. Rellan was more interested in taking assets away from her husband than in securing her own financial future. Judge Hawkins turned to Tessa. Mrs. Rellan, you were represented by counsel during the original proceedings. Did you rely on your attorney's advice regarding the asset division? Tessa stood, and I could see her hands shaking slightly. Yes, Your Honor. Ryan Ventor assured me that I was entitled to half of everything, and that the assets I was claiming would provide financial security. And did you review the financial documents that were provided during discovery? I trusted my attorney to handle those details. So you're saying that you made demands for specific assets worth millions of dollars without personally reviewing the financial information that would tell you what those assets were actually worth? Tessa's face flushed. Ryan said I didn't need to worry about the details. Judge Hawkins made a note. Ms. Wells, your client is asking this court to overturn a legal decree because she failed to understand the financial implications of her own demands? Your Honor, my client was the victim of professional malpractice by her previous attorney, who was compromised by his personal relationship with her. She should not be penalized for his failures. It was another clever argument, and I could see the logic in it. If Ventor had been compromised, then his advice to Tessa might have been tainted. But Grant was ready for this. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Rellan's relationship with Mr. Ventor began months before she filed for divorce, and that she specifically chose him as her attorney because of that relationship, not despite it. Grant presented a new folder to the court. These are phone records showing regular contact between Mrs. Rellan and Mr. Ventor dating back over a year before the divorce filing. We also have credit card records showing that Mrs. Rellan paid for hotel rooms and dinners that were used for meetings with Mr. Ventor during this period. Judge Hawkins reviewed the documents with growing irritation. Ms. Wells, are you suggesting that your client was manipulated into having an affair with her attorney? Wells looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that her judgment may have been compromised during a difficult period in her marriage. Her judgment was compromised, Judge Hawkins repeated. But she wants this court to believe that she was competent to make demands for millions of dollars in assets? The hearing continued for another hour, with Wells presenting increasingly desperate arguments about fraud and coercion. But it was clear that Judge Hawkins wasn't buying any of it. Finally, the judge called for a recess. I'll review all the evidence and issue a ruling within 30 days. As we left the courtroom, Tessa approached me in the hallway. She looked older, worn down by months of financial stress and legal battles. Miles, can we talk? Just for a minute? I looked at Grant, who shrugged. I'll wait by the elevators. Tessa and I found a quiet corner near the windows overlooking downtown Dallas. I know you hate me, she began. I don't hate you, Tessa. I just don't think about you much anymore. I made a mistake, a lot of mistakes. I was angry and greedy, and I listened to the wrong people. Yes, you did. Is there any way we can work something out? Some kind of settlement that would help me get back on my feet? I studied her face, looking for any trace of the woman I'd once been married to. She was there, underneath the desperation and the hardness, but she was different now, changed by consequences. Tessa, you had everything. A beautiful home, financial security, a family, and you threw it all away because you wanted more. I know. You dismissed my son like he was a piece of furniture you didn't want to move. You planned to destroy my life so you could start over in California with your attorney boyfriend. I know, she said again, and I could see tears in her eyes. So no, there's no settlement. There's no working something out. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences. As I walked away, I heard her call after me. Miles, I'm sorry. I'm really truly sorry. I stopped and turned back. Tessa, if you'd said that a year ago before you started planning my destruction, it might have mattered. Now it's just words. 3 weeks later, Judge Hawkins issued her ruling. The motion to overturn the divorce decree was denied. Furthermore, Tessa was ordered to pay court costs and attorney fees for bringing a frivolous lawsuit. That evening, Eli and I celebrated with pizza and a movie in our apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and it was peaceful. Dad, Eli said during a commercial break, do you ever miss the big house? Sometimes, I admitted, but not as much as I thought I would. Me neither. This place feels more like home. Why do you think that is? Eli considered the question seriously. Because it's just us. No drama, no fighting, no walking on eggshells. Just us being a family. Smart kid. Getting smarter all the time. A few months later, I was reading the business section when I saw another small article that caught my attention. Former attorney sentenced to prison for fraud. The article detailed Ryan Ventor's conviction on multiple charges related to his schemes involving female divorce clients. He'd been sentenced to 5 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to his victims. There was no mention of Tessa in the article, but I knew she was one of those victims. She'd lost everything because she'd trusted the wrong person and made the wrong choices. I folded the paper and looked around our apartment. It was small compared to the mansion, but it was comfortable and it was paid for. Eli was doing well in school, my business was growing, and we were building a good life together. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's building something better than what they tried to take from you. But I had to admit, watching Tessa's world collapse hadn't been entirely unpleasant either. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, I thought I'd heard the last of Tessa Rellan. Eli was thriving in high school. My security consulting business had grown to employ 12 people, and we'd moved into a larger apartment with a view of downtown Dallas. Life was good, stable, and mercifully drama-free. Then Detective Lila Vasquez called. Miles, I need to ask you some questions about your ex-wife, she said. Lila and I had served together overseas before she joined the Dallas Police Department. If she was calling, it was serious. What kind of questions? The kind that involve fraud, identity theft, and insurance scams. Can you meet me for coffee? An hour later, I sat across from Lila in a small cafe near the police station, listening to a story that would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. After she lost the house to foreclosure, Lila explained, Tessa moved into a series of progressively cheaper apartments. She's been supporting herself with part-time jobs and what appears to be a string of insurance claims. What kind of claims? Car accidents, slip and falls, workplace injuries, all minor, all just under the threshold that would trigger serious investigation. But the pattern is clear. Lila showed me a file thick with incident reports and insurance documents. The problem is, she got greedy. Last month she filed a claim for a slip and fall at an upscale restaurant, claiming she suffered a back injury that prevents her from working. She's asking for $200,000 in damages. And the restaurant has security cameras that show her faking the fall. She literally looked around to make sure people were watching, then threw herself on the floor. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Why are you telling me this, Lila? Because she listed you as a character witness on her insurance claim, said you could testify to her previous injuries and ongoing medical issues. She what? She's claiming that her current injuries are related to stress and trauma from your marriage, says you were abusive, and that she's been suffering from PTSD since the divorce. The familiar anger rose in my chest, but it was different now. Colder, more focused. What do you need from me? Just the truth. About your marriage, about any medical issues she might have had, about whether there's any basis for her claims. I spent the next hour giving Lila a complete picture of my marriage to Tessa, her perfect health, her active lifestyle, her complete absence of any trauma or stress-related issues during our relationship. She was posting gym selfies on Instagram right up until the divorce was finalized, I told Lila. Personal trainer 3 times a week, yoga classes, hiking trips, not exactly the profile of someone suffering from debilitating injuries. Lila nodded and closed her notebook. That's what I figured. Miles, I have to ask, are you planning to pursue this legally? She's essentially committed perjury by naming you as a witness to false information. What would that involve? Criminal charges for insurance fraud, perjury, and filing false police reports. She's looking at serious jail time if we can prove a pattern of fraudulent claims. I thought about Eli, about the life we'd built, about whether dragging this out further was worth the satisfaction of seeing Tessa face consequences for her latest scheme. Let me think about it, I said. That evening, I discussed the situation with Eli over dinner. At 16, he was mature enough to understand the complexities of adult problems and smart enough to offer good advice. What do you think I should do? I asked him. Eli considered the question while twirling pasta around his fork. Dad, do you remember what you told me about winning the war instead of just the battle? Yeah. Well, you already won the war. She lost everything. You rebuilt your life, and we're happy. Sending her to jail won't make us any happier, but it will definitely make our lives more complicated. Smart kid, getting wiser all the time. But, Eli continued, she shouldn't be allowed to lie about you. That's not fair, and it could hurt your business if people believe her. He was right on both counts. I'd already won everything that mattered, but I couldn't let Tessa's lies go unchallenged. The next morning, I called Grant Kessler. She did what? Grant asked after I explained the situation. Filed an insurance claim naming me as a witness to her supposed injuries and trauma. Grant was quiet for a moment. Miles, this is actually perfect. How is insurance fraud perfect? Because it gives us the opportunity to end this permanently. We can file a defamation suit based on her false claims about your marriage, and we can seek damages for any harm to your business reputation. I don't want to drag this out for years, Grant. We won't have to. With her history and the evidence Lila has gathered, this will be a slam dunk. More importantly, it will establish a legal record that prevents her from making any future claims involving you or your family. Grant paused. There's something else to consider. If Tessa is convicted of insurance fraud, she'll likely face jail time. That would remove any possibility of her causing problems for you or Eli in the future. I thought about it for the rest of the day. By evening, I'd made my decision. The next morning, I called Lila. I want to pursue charges. You sure about this? I'm sure. She's had multiple chances to learn from her mistakes, and she keeps making the same choices. Maybe jail time will finally teach her about consequences. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, Tessa was arrested on charges of insurance fraud, perjury, and filing false police reports. The evidence was overwhelming: security camera footage, medical records that contradicted her claims, and a pattern of similar fraudulent claims dating back 18 months. Grant filed our defamation suit the same day, seeking damages for harm to my business reputation and emotional distress caused by her false accusations. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in the same courthouse where our divorce had been finalized. I arrived early, wearing my best suit and carrying a folder of documents that would destroy whatever remained of Tessa's credibility. Tessa looked terrible. She'd lost more weight, her hair was unkempt, and she wore a cheap dress that looked like it came from a discount store. Her court-appointed attorney looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Judge Hawkins presided over this hearing as well, and she recognized both of us immediately. Ms. Rellan, she said, I see you're back in my courtroom. I can't say I'm surprised. The prosecutor presented the evidence methodically. Security camera footage showing Tessa deliberately falling in the restaurant. Medical records proving she had no injuries. Insurance documents showing a pattern of fraudulent claims, But the most damaging evidence was Tessa's own social media posts. Even while claiming to be disabled and traumatized, she'd continued posting photos of herself at parties, shopping trips, and social events. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "the defendant has shown a complete disregard for the law and a willingness to lie under oath for financial gain. She's also made false accusations against her ex-husband in an attempt to support her fraudulent claims." When it was time for Tessa's defense, her attorney stood briefly. "Your Honor, my client has struggled financially since her divorce and may have made some poor decisions. We ask for the court's mercy." Judge Hawkins looked at Tessa with undisguised contempt. "Ms. Rellan, you've appeared before this court multiple times, and each time you've shown the same pattern of dishonesty and manipulation. You seem to believe that the legal system exists to solve your financial problems rather than to ensure justice." Tessa started to speak, but Judge Hawkins cut her off. "You've committed perjury, insurance fraud, and defamation. You've wasted court resources and taxpayer money. Most importantly, you've made false accusations against a man who has shown remarkable patience with your behavior." Judge Hawkins paused, consulting her notes. "I'm sentencing you to 18 months in county jail, followed by 2 years of probation. You'll also pay restitution to the insurance companies you've defrauded and damages to Mr. Rellan for defamation." Tessa finally found her voice. "Your Honor, please. I can't go to jail. I'll lose my apartment, my job, everything. Ms. Rellan, you lost everything the day you decided that lying and cheating were easier than taking responsibility for your own choices." As the bailiff led Tessa away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Anger, maybe, or regret, or just the final recognition that her actions had consequences. Outside the courthouse, Grant and I stood in the parking lot, watching the media vans that had gathered to cover the story. "How do you feel?" Grant asked. "Like a man who just watched justice get served. Again." "She'll probably serve 9 months with good behavior. That's 9 months she can't cause problems for anyone else." Grant nodded. "Miles, I have to ask. Do you think she learned anything from all this?" I thought about the question as we walked to our cars. I think Tessa learned that there are consequences for her actions. Whether she learned to make better choices remains to be seen. That evening, Eli and I had dinner at our favorite restaurant, the same place where we'd celebrated the end of the divorce proceedings 2 years earlier. "So it's really over?" Eli asked. "It's really over." Good. I was getting tired of hearing about Tessa's drama. I looked at my son, this remarkable young man who'd handled more adult problems than most kids his age, and felt a surge of pride and gratitude. "Eli, I want you to remember something about all this." "What's that?" "Your choices have consequences. Good choices lead to good consequences. Bad choices lead to bad consequences. Tessa spent years making bad choices, and now she's facing the consequences. What about you, Dad? What consequences are you facing?" I looked around the restaurant, at the comfortable life we'd built, at the future that stretched ahead of us. I'm facing the consequences of choosing to fight for what matters and letting go of what doesn't. And what matters? You, our family. Building something good instead of just tearing down something bad. Eli smiled. "Those sound like pretty good consequences." "Yeah," I said. "They really are." 6 months later, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. The return address showed it was from the county jail. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Miles," the letter began, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Not just sorry I got caught, but sorry for everything I put you and Eli through. I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I finally understand what you meant about consequences. I spent so many years thinking the world owed me something that I forgot I had to earn what I wanted. I know it's too late to fix what I broke, but I wanted you to know that I finally get it. You were a good husband, and I was a terrible wife. Eli is lucky to have you as a father. I hope you're both happy and successful. You deserve it. Tessa. I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it in my desk drawer. It was probably sincere, but sincerity after the fact doesn't undo the damage that came before. Still, it was something. Maybe Tessa really had learned about consequences. Maybe she'd make better choices when she got out, or maybe she'd go right back to her old patterns and end up in jail again. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I had a business to run, a son to raise, and a life to live. And all of it was built on the foundation of good choices and their consequences. Everything except her son, she'd said 2 years ago. Everything except her son had turned out to be everything.